Overcoming archetypes of conflict is the topic of our session number 9. In the previous session, we saw that history repeats itself until resentments have been melted away and wounds healed. This can only take place through restoration. And the Cain and Abel archetypes clearly show extreme behaviors and attitudes that we all share at times. So we talk here about immature Abel and immature Cain, the ones whose story is told in the Bible. So from the story we understand that Abel loved God, but was not able to win the heart of his brother, who was consumed with resentment. And also, he had God's blessing, but did not share it with his brother. On the other side, immature Cain was consumed with resentment over perceived injustice, not seeing his brother from God's point of view. And moreover, he was unable to control his anger, so he killed his brother. By becoming aware of these features in ourselves and not only in others, we can decide to act differently. So we can act like mature Abel and mature Cain, rather than reacting automatically as Cain and Abel in their immature state did. And that takes self-control and continuous practice. How should they have behaved? Mature Abel is humble, and even though he's blessed by God, he remains humble, and he forgives and is tolerant in the face of abuse. So even if he feels someone's jealousy and someone's anger and hatred, he forgives that person, and he goes to the person and serves that person to melt his resentment. And if he cannot do it himself, then he asks for someone to mediate, to help him. And that really requires maturity and humility. So many times, Abel, who is blessed and has everything, feels superior, so he will not accept mediation from a third party. What is Cain's situation? Mature Cain overcomes resentment over past rejection. He's able to feel that rejection and what happened in the past was due to immaturity of the people, of those who created resentment in him. And he recognizes the value of the brother who is better off, who has more blessings, who is greater than himself. And he even rejoices over the brother's success. And as he rejoices over that, he goes to him and receives from him the understanding of what he can change in order to also be successful and to receive blessings. So he overcomes hatred and is ready to reconcile. Readiness to reconcile is really something that requires having overcome resentment, having overcome the feeling of being a victim of the other person's behavior. So we see that the key to peace is something that everyone has heard many, many times, but is difficult to implement. To forgive even those who have caused us great harm and whose victims we feel to be. This is what turns an enemy into a friend and breaks the cycle of violence and revenge. This is the greatest sign of maturity and of parenthood. We see in Martin Luther King Jr.'s words a key to loving the enemy. He said, "We never get rid of an enemy by meeting hate with hate. We get rid of an enemy by getting rid of enmity." Sun Myung Moon was imprisoned unjustly countless times, and in the midst of persecution and accusation, he, for example, met his former enemy Kim Il-sung and followed Jesus' example of forgiving, loving, and embracing, so that an enemy became a friend. Also, Mahatma Gandhi said these great words, "When I despair, I remember that all through history, the ways of truth and love have always won." Also be applied in the conflict resolution in marriage. It's the same restoration that must take place between men and women. For a long time, they have had well-defined behaviors, statuses, and roles, and also tasks in the household. And thus conflicts happened less frequently. But as we live in the age of independence, or more interdependence and freedom, gender equality, a lot needs to change in the minds and hearts of both men and women. They have to become coaches for each other, and that seems like the most sensible approach. So each need to take responsibility for their contribution to the conflict. That happens again and again as a couple, especially with children, will face in their lives, in their daily lives, confronted with difficulties, economic difficulties or social difficulties, and all kinds of challenges. So they need to consider how they could have dealt with the problem differently. This is really an important part of the reflection that has to take place after a conflict has started. And we need to do that right after the conflict and not after many, many days have passed, because then obviously the probability that many new problems arise is much greater, and that getting back to the original love that a husband and wife felt towards each other might be more difficult. And then the need to take action. They have to address whatever caused the other person to feel hurt and violated in their feelings and in their hearts. Try to understand each other. Also be open to reconcile, sometimes staying in the victim position on either side, feeling that the other one did what is wrong and waiting for the other to come back is a tendency. So this requires to overcome pride. Sometimes going to the spouse and telling that we're sorry for our attitude will open the path for the spouse to be proud and to accuse. So there has to be a real common trust in each other's being ready to take the right action and overcome pride, and to seek to correct past injustices is a priority. Reconciling and renewing one's relationship between two spouses is really an important step at any time of marriage. And this requires giving up the urge to retaliate and forgiving and accepting forgiveness. And finally, resolving to change oneself, realizing that this is the only way to open the path for the other to change, is really the understanding and resolution of the mature able, whether the man or the woman. Because that person can adjust to the needs of the other one, who still has an immature part in that particular time of their married life. And so that person can create a new environment in which the partner will be able to feel loved and thus evolve and also become more and more mature. There are numerous writings or books, literature, advice on marriage and how to overcome conflicts and challenges. But even so, the number of divorces still doesn't seem to diminish. So it is not knowledge only of all these things that help us go forward, but the practice and the daily overcoming of all these problems that help us solve the past and create a new future of love between spouses and in the family. So now to questions of session 9. What are the characteristics of the Abel and Cain archetypes? That means the immature Abel and Cain. How can one get rid of an enemy? At a time when men and women are understood as equal, what should they do to establish a harmonious couple? Please reflect on these questions and write your personal answers to them.